Hello, everyone. We are back for Vote Local Day 2022. I almost said 2020 and taking us back a few years. No. We are here in 2022. We are not going back. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. As a reminder, Vote Local Day is a nonpartisan event. As you may have seen or heard, we are recording this panel. Attendees are not on camera, just our incredible panelists. We are going to have time for questions and answers at the end of the panel. If you've got questions, comments, anything you want to say, go ahead and throw them in the chat and we will be sure that they get answered. And with that, I am going to throw it over to y'all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you for having this day. So as Kate said, hello and welcome to Be the Ones Vote Local Day. Vote Local Day is a nonpartisan event designed to share information and tools so folks are ready to vote in local races this November and make informed decisions impacting our communities. While the fight for reproductive justice has been going on for decades, it's been recently really given a spotlight due to recent federal, state, and local regulations. In response to this, the Atlanta City Council passed resolutions protecting those seeking abortion services and supporting them with cost care, despite harmful state laws. Today, we will explore how to create positive change at the local level and what you can do to have an impact. My name is Munir Meghjani, and I will be your host for this conversation. And today we're joined by some really phenomenal change makers and activists who I have the pleasure of calling friends. Executive Director of Amplify Georgia, Allison Coffman, comedian, writer, actress, activist, and a fellow co-podcast host, Joyelle Nicole Johnson, and a self-described abortion stan. And of course, Atlanta City Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari, who is coming to us fresh from a protest in the city of Atlanta as well. Hello and welcome so much. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start off, first of all, just saying, I tell a lot of people that it's important to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think there's certain situations where you really need to seek discomfort, which is what I'm doing today. This is a topic that I am passionate about, but not as well versed on as I should be. So I ask for your grace, and please feel free to chime in if at any time my statements or words are unintentionally harmful or even misinformed. I wanted to start off with a question to all of you. What do you think is the biggest misconception that you hear about reproductive justice and or abortion? Oh, Allison, I'll toss it to you first. Sorry, I don't know how it just went on me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for having us here today. I think there are so many misconceptions. It was really hard for me to choose one thing to focus on, but I think one I'd like to highlight is misconceptions around who are having abortions in the US. So when we look at who's having abortions, the over half, around 59% of people who have abortions in the US are already parents. So these really are people that are making the best decisions, not only for themselves, but for their existing children and family. 62% identify as religious. 75% are poor or low income. And over half of the folks seeking abortions are actually people of color. I often hear folks say, like, abortion is a white woman's issue. It's something that maybe doesn't impact certain communities, but the reality is it does, and that it is often intersecting with many other barriers and injustices that communities are experiencing.
Yeah, that is a surprise to me to hear that it is parents and people who are religious. That is really, really surprising, because if you think about the way that the media portrays it, it's definitely, just like college students, right? And that's it. So that's really, really surprising to me. Joyelle, you're shaking your head. I'll toss it over to you next.
Yes, I do not have percentages and facts and figures like Allison does, because I'm a comedian. But I think one of my biggest misconceptions is that we are walking around sad, regretting it. I'm someone who had an abortion. And, when I escort people into clinics all over the country with the Abortion Access Front, the antis will say, "You're going to regret it." I regretted mine or whatever happened. And I'm like, no, there are no regrets over here. And you can live a happy, healthy, mentally life after having an abortion or two. So the fact that people think we're sad and regretful, I think is a huge misconception because I'm not.
I'm Joelle's biggest fan. I'll go next, I guess. Well, oh God, where do I start? One of my biggest frustrations, I suppose not about abortion, but around the abortion movement, is when people call anti-choice people pro-life, because that is horribly incorrect. I consider myself both pro-choice and pro-life because I believe in cradle to grave legislation and cradle to grave rights, cradle to grave care. Whereas people who claim that they are pro-life and are anti-choice are actually people who only care about forced birth. They're not saying that there are people out there that are anti-choice and not also pro-life, but I have still not met one. So I would say that is one of them. I would also say that the misconceptions that conservatives aren't out there having abortions, because that's a lie. Also, that a majority of that there's people having abortions up in their third trimester all the time, when that makes up less than, like, what, Allison, 2% of abortions, less than 1%?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1% of abortions. And that's typically somebody who's already chosen out their child's name, has already prepped their nursery, is excited that they're having this baby, has made these plans, and for some for some horrible reason has to choose to terminate their pregnancy because either their life is at risk or the child's life is at risk, or both. Or their child is considered, there's some issue where where that child is not going to make it, and bringing them to term would actually probably be more cruel than having an abortion. So those are a few of my most annoyed. And also, please stop calling it the heartbeat bill. It's not a heartbeat bill, it's an abortion bill. Again, feeding into the misconception. And so
I learned from Allison yesterday that it is the early abortion bill, because it doesn't even always go till 6 weeks. They're turning people away even weeks before. So I think, Councilmember Liliana, I wanted to ask you a specific question about Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. So we've seen an onslaught of harmful reproductive justice bills come through the state legislators across the country. And while those are still confusing, they're at least heavily being discussed in the media, on the news, on Twitter. But what a lot of people aren't talking about and are continue to be confused about is our local and municipal leaders. Can you briefly tell us what the role is of Atlanta City Council as a whole, your role within it, and what the current barriers to safe abortion are in Atlanta?
Yes, so thanks for that question. I would say first, just saying that the bills that are being carried forth that are anti-abortion bills are being carried forth by white men, which we all know that they've had such difficulty with pregnancy. That's a joke, it's sarcasm, not like they're walking around carrying babies, and yet they are experts on them. I think one of the things that people also fail to realize is that just because abortion has been legal, which has been great, it doesn't mean that there haven't been conservatives and individuals that are trying to pass trap laws. So there have been attempts to shut down Planned Parenthoods or abortion clinics by doing things like not allowing their waste to be picked up, or making sure that you have to come back, for example, even organizations like Planned Parenthood and other abortion clinics will have to read, by Georgia law, have to read in, like, are you sure that you want to do this? This is what can happen to your child. This is the pain that they can feel. This is they have to read off these facts, not because they want to, but because the Republican legislature made that a law, that they would have to do that in efforts to continue to shame the person that has made the decision to seek out an abortion, as an attempt to still deter them from doing so and sending them materials in the mail, et cetera. I would also like to point out that, Allison, I'm not sure if this is still the case, maybe you can correct me, but I do know that at least I think still $2 million of Georgia's budget goes to CPCs, crisis pregnancy centers, which are centers that lead people in under the impression that they will give them an abortion, but then it's a trap, and it's to shame them. It's actually incredibly cruel, and it should be illegal. But of course, in Georgia, Republicans saw fit to fit that into the budget. So they're actually funding them, not actual clinics, not clinics that are professionals or even have medical expertise, but that are advertising and luring people in under the false pretense that they're going to have an abortion, only to trap them in the building and then repeatedly shame them and tell them all these things that are going to happen to them, et cetera. But there are various other trap laws that Allison will be far more an expert on than myself. But again, just because abortions were illegal, and yes, they should still be, and we still need to fight for that. Southern states like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia have been putting in trap laws for quite some time, and other states as well have been putting in trap laws to make it as difficult as possible to keep abortions from happening. And that has been the case ever since abortion was legal.
Wow. So how can, you know, in Atlanta City Council, right, y'all have done some really innovative and creative things. For example, this summer passed not one, but two resolutions protecting reproductive justice, right? Both which you've championed. Can you tell us a little bit more about those resolutions and what impact they will have?
Oh yes, the first one that we did was the decriminalization of abortion, essentially saying, because we knew we had a trap law on the books. I mean, we knew that we had an abortion ban on the books, and that the second, the reason it hadn't passed yet is because it was being ruled unconstitutional. So we knew that once the Supreme Court made their ruling, that it was only a matter of time before it went into effect. So the intention was to decriminalize abortion and ask Atlanta police to basically stating, we want you to make this the lowest possible priority. And we don't want any city money going towards the reporting of data of people that are having abortions or aiding and abetting in any way, shape, or form to incarcerating or penalizing people that are seeking out abortions.
And so the city council have that power to tell the police, hey, this is going to be, you know, not something that we're going to prioritize here. We're not making this, you know, like, can you decriminalize it here, or are you just able to tell them to lower it on their priorities?
We're able to ask them. The mayor is the one that can have that conversation with the APD, but that was fully backed by the mayor. And essentially a lot of the misconception was, oh, what you're doing is illegal. No. It is common practice in cities for the administration, for municipality to determine what comes in terms of priority. Not everything can be high priority. That's why you have certain things like, for example, the decriminalization of marijuana or other crimes like jaywalking, et cetera, that are far lower on the priority list than, say, homicide. And so, and abortion is not homicide. So I can already hear the antis in my head. Yeah. And so the intention was that this is not the same thing as rape or kidnapping or murder or that. So this needs to make this the lowest possible priority, because it was our way as a city saying, we do not support the turnover of Roe v. Wade. And we want to make sure that we provide a safe space for people that are coming and seeking their medical right to an abortion and their right to choose what to do with their body. The second one we passed, a lot of credit here due to Allison and Amplify for having a meeting and basically saying like, hey, other cities like Austin and other places are starting to look at setting up an abortion fund. Can we do the same thing here in Atlanta? So we worked together with the full backing of the mayor. The day that Roe v. Wade was overturned, I called the mayor and I said, can I please move forward? Because Allison and I had already had a conversation. I'd already talked with Amplify quite a bit. We had identified money that we could put aside for this. So essentially the day that Roe v. Wade was overturned, I called the mayor and said, can we go ahead and pull the trigger and move forward with this? And he said, absolutely. And we essentially set aside $300,000 because we cannot run that ourselves because of preemptions. We did it as a $300,000 donation to the National Network of Abortion Funds on behalf of ARC Southeast, so that they could utilize that money to help people seeking abortions in the city of Atlanta.
And I think what you just said is such the crux of our conversation today of vote local, right? People get excited when it's the presidential election, when it's this, but that, and then we don't show up to local elections that have such an impact on our lives every single day. And Allison, the resolution that Liliana mentioned, these are the results of years of hard work with local community partners and organizations like yours. Can you share a little bit more about Amplify Georgia and how you all go about partnering with local elected officials?
Yeah, so Amplify Georgia is a collaborative of reproductive justice organizations and allies working to protect and expand abortion access in Georgia at the state and local level through proactive campaigns. And some of our partners include, Sister Song, Feminist Women's Health Center, Access to Reproductive Care Southeast, the National Asian Pacific Women's Forum. We've got Spark Reproductive Justice. We've got Urge. And New Georgia Project. So a lot of incredible partners who are really leading the work that we are housing and facilitating, on a day-to-day basis. And you're right, this resolution came about through years of hard work. Often we'll talk about Kansas, right? Happened in Kansas. We'll talk about what happened in Atlanta and it'll seem like magic. Like, all of a sudden all these people turned out and like there was unprecedented vote or there was an unprecedented resolution. But what's happening is there have been years, if not decades, of work being led by community members, being led by local organizations, and being led by like champion elected officials who are passionate about these issues. And that was the case for this funding resolution. So back in 2018, when Amplify started, we dreamed of a city abortion fund. A lot of folks thought that wouldn't be possible. And, even we knew like it could be hard. But when we looked at the power of the city council, when we looked at the power of the mayor, like we saw that it was there. It was just a matter of holding folks accountable, right? And pushing for change. And so when HB 41, Georgia's early abortion ban, was passed back in 2019 and the city council issued a resolution condemning this ban, we saw the opportunity, right, to step in and be like, great, like those words are awesome. Like, wouldn't it be incredible if you actually took action also to expand access to abortion care in Atlanta? And so we started with a reproductive justice commission. We established Abortion Provider Appreciation Day, and slowly through relationship building and progressive legislation, we eventually got to this point where we were able to work with Liliana to introduce an abortion funding resolution. And a really key piece of that is also, as you mentioned, Munir, electing local champions. Like this work would not be possible if we didn't have progressive allies and the local government who are willing to take those steps and like take the risk, right, to actually innovate and allocate city funding. So that's how we got to where we are in Atlanta. And I'll share a little bit more later, kind of what it looks like and how we can identify those local champions that make it possible for this change.
Absolutely. I think for a lot of us on the outside, when Kansas voted the way they did, a lot of us were like, did somebody just have red shoes together and this happened? Like, how did this happen, right? And you forget the grassroots work that's been going on for decades, if not longer, to make things like that happen.
Yeah, and people write off the South. And like, that's to their detriment. Like, we are only the 6th city in the US that has passed a resolution like this, and the 1st in the Southeast. Like, we are very much leading the way, and other states, other cities better watch out.
Yeah, that is absolutely phenomenal. So Joyelle, you've been an outspoken advocate for abortion, wanting to normalize the word. You've talked about your abortion on stage in your comedy acts. You even combine your comedy and activism with Lady Parts Justice League, which you go on tour with. And you've even been given the nickname the Protest Whisperer. Why is this so important to you? Why risk such a successful career for this, right? And like, you're on TV, you're doing phenomenal things. Your career as a comedian, especially as a Black woman comedian, is just throttling. Why take so much risk for something like this?
I don't think I would be here without my abortion. Okay. I got pregnant and, I talk about it on stage. I got pregnant on the floor of an Amtrak train in the handicapped restroom. And that's a real fact that I love to tell people, just because I know I'm not the only one. Okay. Granted, maybe I'm the only one having sex on the floor of an Amtrak train, but I'm not the only person who got pregnant in college, And that's another thing, going back to what you were saying of the things that we don't really like about the movement. I appreciate all of the dramatic stories of the 10-year-old, with her foster parents who got pregnant, or the woman in her 3rd trimester. But those aren't most of our stories. A lot of people were just an irresponsible college student who was on a train and who was sad and was irresponsible with her boyfriend, And that story, when I tell that story on stage, I can feel a shift in the crowd. I've had people come up to me afterwards, sometimes with tears in their eyes. I had a woman from Texas whisper to me after I got off stage, "Oh my God, I had an abortion too." I was like, "Girl, why are you whispering?" I'm like, you didn't hear me just yell it on stage into a microphone? So it's not a risk for me. Trolls don't come after me as much as they do Liz Winstead, who is the leader of the Abortion Access Front, formerly Lady Parts Justice. But they come after me a little bit, and luckily I'm 41, so bring it. I don't care about that. So I don't think it's a risk. I think it's empowerment, And we definitely want to normalize the word and make people understand that it's not a bad thing. It's not murder. And it's something that we have been doing since the dawn of time and will continue to do no matter what laws you put in place. So I just want to be a beacon of screaming that out into the world and making people laugh at the same time.
Go.
I don't know, Joyelle, you seem a little shy. I think you might need to.
Just a little bit shy, you know.
What would you say to, because creatives so often kind of partner and have this role that they play of normalizing things, right, as we're making progress. What would you say to an upcoming artist of anyone in the creative space who's maybe a little nervous about using their voice because they're like, oh, I don't know how it's going to impact this part of my life, right? What would you kind of say to them?
Ooh, get therapy. I learned how to use my voice in therapy. That's one of the hugest things that I worked on with my therapist. And it's funny because, you know, for the first half of my life, I wasn't able to use my voice. And my therapist is like, the irony of you choosing stand-up comedy when, because I was a shy person. I was a shy kid. And I finally got out of my box with that. And now there's no shutting me up. I mean, there's no way you're going to squash my voice anymore. So yeah, if you're scared to use your voice, get you some therapy and some good friends and get on a microphone and yell things.
Put it out there in the world. I love it.
Yes.
I love it. You are the first official abortion stan that I met when we were doing our podcast together. I was like, oh, this is
absolutely
next level. I like it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm pro-abortion.
Yeah, I think we need that energy, especially with where we are now. So Allison, we were talking about electing these officials who are going to be willing to partner with us, right? And people have a hard time enough figuring out who to vote for president or senator. And then you get down to the bottom of the ballot, you're like 30 people deep. And either you're just going down the ballot and voting one way, or sometimes you're not even finishing your ballot because you're voting for one or two and then you're done, right? How, you know, it's very overwhelming. And your org came up with the toolkit, which we're going to post in our link. If you're listening to this later, it will be on betheones.org. And the toolkit really helps you figure out how to qualify candidates through the reproductive justice framework. Can you talk a little bit about that and share insight on what folks should be looking for, especially for the candidates who don't touch on the topic, who may not have taken a stance at all, and who may be even quiet strategically because they're worried about losing the larger, you know, picture? How do we navigate that landscape?
Yeah, it can be really tricky, you know, to be able to vet candidates, especially when they won't speak on the issue. But what we like to talk about are different proxies and ways you can gauge whether or not they are likely reproductive justice champions, or at least, you know, supporters of the issues that we care about when we vote. So just a quick rehash: reproductive justice, right? It's a framework. It's the right to bodily autonomy, the right to have children, to not have children, and to parent those children in safe and sustainable communities. It was developed by a group of Black women in 1994 who really wanted a framework that spoke to the intersectionality of their lives. And so we hold that when we think about these parameters for identifying candidates. So one thing is to look for red flags. Like a reproductive justice champion, they are not anti-LGBTQ, right? They are not tough on crime. They are not looking to put more money into policing or into jailing. They're not anti-birth control. They're obviously not anti-abortion. They're also not anti-union, right? And they're interested in environmental justice, right? Because that comes down to our ability to parent and live in safe communities. So if they're an incumbent, it can be a little bit easier, right? So if they've already been in office, you can look at their voting record. That should be publicly accessible. You can also look at where they're allocating money. A lot of being an elected official is building budgets, and money talks, right? So where you put your money is where your values are. So are they investing in schools? Are they investing in public health? You know, are they investing in menstrual products, right? So we can have menstrual equity. So looking at where they're putting their money and where they're not putting their money is really important. And it's also important to look at what they've done with the time outside of being an elected official or running for office. So what kind of work do they do in community? Who are they in relationship with? What are their lived experiences? Like, do they really understand what is important to you and your communities? And at a guttural, instinctual level, are they going to be able to make decisions and vote based on those lived experiences and relationships that they already hold? So those are some of the things we talk about looking at. And of course, like, it can take a little bit of digging, but it can also be helpful to look at organizations you trust and kind of how, if they are a C4 and are able to endorse candidates, who they are talking about and think are, most likely to champion their work.
So avoiding the white, pale, and stale, maybe, and thinking about, the new and the young, and
you said it, Munir, not me.
I said, I'll take it. I'll take the heat for it. What's kind of funny is when we were looking at promoting the post on Instagram, I know that if I put abortion rights or repo rights, Instagram was going to block the ad. Yeah. And so literally who I targeted was people, and I said LGBTQ, climate justice, sustainability. Those were the people I was like, I'm assuming that if they're fighting for all of these things, they're going to be, like promoting this as well. So the mashup makes just so much sense, right? While I was putting the questions together for this, the one question that I really had to step back and think about, and Liliana, this is for you, it's finding the balance of when and where the government has a say in our daily lives, right? It seems a lot more complicated with LGBTQ laws, abortion laws, repo laws as a whole. Recently, at a campaign event that I was at, I heard about a doctor who literally couldn't tell her patient about chemo because of the impact that it would have on the fetus. Do you see a future where we're able to gain back our autonomy on these things, where we don't need laws to govern who we marry or what kids we do or don't have?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, can we just acknowledge that you said white, pale, and stale? Because I'm going to get shirts made.
I heard it at an event and I was like, I am so using that at some point.
White, pale, and stale. But to answer your question, absolutely. I mean, I think that a number of people have already shown that's the case, because we have individuals who are stepping up. You have pilots that are saying, you need a ride, you need to get a trip to New York or a different state that's still granting, that still is a reproductive pro-choice state. Then I'll give you that ride. You have community members that are stepping up and saying, I mean, the community, to me, the community is the antithesis of everything, because if you have a community, you have connection, and it completely goes against what I feel that government and more of a capitalistic society attempts to make people feel, which is alone and completely dependent on solely the government and not their community. When you have members that are there, when you have the ability to not feel alone, it creates a completely different environment. So you have already so many individuals, agencies, even, I mean, Dick's Sporting Goods, for God's sakes, that is like, you need funding to go to a different state to have an abortion. We'll pay for that.
Right.
So
right.
I already see that happening, because there are so many, unlike in the past, you have corporate entities, agencies, individuals that have the power, the finances, the resources to get people what they need. And they're saying, screw your laws. I'm not abiding by this. And the thing is like, this is like the good version of Pandora's box. We've had all these rights for all these years. Taking them back is not going to be easily done. And I don't think I don't think this country is going to stand by and allow an authoritarian regime to take over to force and institute those laws.
It just irks me so much when we have to rely on like these capitalist companies to help protect basic everyday rights that people should have, and I'm hoping that we can get more folks elected like you, so we don't have to rely on these companies and their kind of decision making on how we live our lives.
And I think go ahead, Al. Well,
I was just going to say, it's not just capitalist companies, though. Like, there are many local organizations, mutual aid organizations that are stepping up and into this. And I've been so heartened by, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that are going to abortion funds, millions of dollars that are going to abortion funds, which are community-run, grassroots, mutual aid organizations funding abortions and funding travel and hotel costs. So I
I
do
love
think
that.
there are folks stepping in and filling that void on a very like community-based way. But we'll take the corporation's money too.
Yes.
And governments still need to fulfill their promise to the people who elected them.
Yes.
Yeah, this would not, and none of this would be possible without community organizers. As you saw, like, that's great that I was able to champion a resolution and get it across the finish line, but it wouldn't have happened if the organizers that had been doing this work for so many years hadn't come to me and asked, like, given me the ability and honored me with the opportunity to do that work.
Right.
So, and I think another important thing that should be noted is that of the agencies that Allison named, almost all of them, if not all of them, are Black female led. So that's another important thing, is like, I have a lot of respect for longstanding agencies that are really good at getting a lot of press, but organizations like Amplify, Sister Song, ARC, INNAF, all these other ones are the ones that are actually doing the work of locating individuals, getting them to where they need to go, paying for their funds, assisting them with all of that.
Yeah.
And organizations that get millions, if not billions of dollars a year, that are essentially saying we're here to educate people, that's well and good. But there are other agencies, I mean, people are educated at this point, because if you're not using Google, then I don't know what to tell you. But also, if you also have people that are over here, the Black women and leaders that have been doing this work a lot longer, that understand how to get it done, understand what is needed, and is not wasting their time with education, because the opportunity for education is all around us. That's all well and good. Their thing is, let me make the dollar count. I'll get you to where you need to go. Let's get you the help that you need, because I don't need to sit here and educate you, because you're already an expert on your own circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to the point that both of y'all made, Allison and Liliana, Joyelle, on our Confused Caucus podcast, we talked in one of our episodes about how women, and specifically Black women, have the best radar given everything that they've gone through. This is another case of that, where people of color, especially Black people, have disproportionately been impacted, even though they've been doing this work the longest as well, right? Can you speak a little bit on why that is? Because there's so many misconceptions around that as well.
Speak on why people don't listen to Black women?
Yes, that would be great. If you have the answer to that, we can just end the rest of the conversations here.
I mean, what is the meaning of life, Joyelle? I don't know why people don't listen to Black women. We've been this whole entire time trying to scream from the rooftops, like, especially in 2016. The biggest thing for me was the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court and all of our organizations, especially with Lady Parts Justice, now Abortion Access Front, we were like, we have to vote for the Supreme Court. And they wanted to make us feel like we were crazy, because we said they're going after Roe, they're going after Roe. And nobody listened to us screaming at the top of our lungs, once again, some of us into microphones. So I don't know why people don't listen to women of color, and especially Black women, because we get it right like 90-something% of the time, especially because we don't vote against our own self-interest like some other stale, pale, I don't know what you call them, but here's the thing, we're going to vote in ways that impact us to help the community get together, because we're the mothers of the community. I don't have no kids, but I am a mother of a community, and I want my life to be better, but my life's not going to be better if I'm taking rights from everybody else. So I guess the thing is about being, especially a Black woman, we're like at the bottom, of getting rights, being a woman and being a person of color. So I'm going to have more empathy, I think, in situations. And I'm going to be like, maybe don't do that, because that's going to make all of our lives worse. So I don't know why people don't listen to Black women, but y'all should.
When we turn this into a podcast, the title of this episode is going to be Listen to Black Women.
Yeah, get that on a shirt.
We need to. If it's not already, I was going to say, if it's not already, we definitely need to.
Trust Black women is already out there.
Trust Black women, stand with Black women, and let us lead.
That's the next voter guide, right?
Yes.
There you go.
Another thing for the voter guide real quick is, this is something that's been very interesting, because I've been getting shamed a lot, mostly by men, for showing emotion while on council. I was ashamed for showing emotion as we sat there and discussed expanding that. We sat there and as a council discussed solving mass incarceration, overcrowding in jails by expanding mass incarceration. That's essentially saying, oh, something's on fire. Let me let me just throw some more fuel on the flames.
Mhm.
Let me throw some more wood into that. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But I was upset, and I showed that I was upset, and I was told, you can't ever let people get to you like that. You can't show that emotion. And I just want to remind us all that suppression of emotions and being encouraged to do so is a tool and a form of white supremacy.
Mm.
But if you're going to elect someone who actually emotes for the right reasons,
Yeah,
stands up and
absolutely.
says something, rather than like civilly saying that they disagree. These are not topics to be civil on. I'm sorry.
Mm.
I'm not telling you to harm another person, but if you aren't getting upset, if you aren't getting fired up about these conversations, you can calmly talk about taking away someone's rights or putting someone away in jail forever without, like, if you're all for dehumanizing people through numbers rather than stories, rather than telling their stories, and there's something wrong with you, and you honestly should not be sitting at the table helping to craft legislation that it could impact thousands of lives.
I also think though that speaks to like voting people for whom these issues are actually like impactful in our own lives and community, because like we get emotional when we're doing the work for ourselves and for our people and for our communities. Like, it's easy to be stale and removed when you're taking away the rights from someone else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah.
I mean, this is another thing. Everybody has skeletons in the closet. Some of us are just stale, pale, and affluent enough to hide them. So
Absolutely.
keep that in mind.
Absolutely. So, Allison, I think one group that is not good about listening to Black women and maybe stepping in is cis men, right? I've heard
Cis white men.
excuses from what?
Also cis men, but
Yeah, that's what. Yeah,
especially cis white men.
yeah. And so I've heard excuses from, oh, this doesn't impact me, to I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do, to the best one of, oh, I don't want to overstep. What is the role of a man in this fight, right? Other than to not try and control the body of a woman, like, are we supposed to be just amplifiers, bridge creators, just make more room at the table? What is it that they're supposed to do?
Yeah. I really appreciate this question. When you talked about misconceptions, this would have been the thing I shared at the top. But I'm just really sick of hearing cis men talk about how they care about these issues because they have a mother, or they have a sister, or they have a daughter. Although these issues disproportionately impact women and marginalized genders, sex and sexuality is stigmatized for all genders, including men.
Mhm.
Especially men of color, especially gay men. We don't have to look far back in history. We could talk about the Tuskegee syphilis study,
Mhm.
which, forced Black men to continue without telling them they had syphilis, resulting in incredible bodily harm, including death. We could talk about the HIV/AIDS epidemic response, and how, because it impacted many cis but gay men, people just didn't care about it. It impacted a lot of Black folks. It impacted a lot of people of color and poor people. We could talk about the distribution of PrEP, and we could talk about the monkeypox vaccine and how it struggled at the start, and how that disproportionately impacted gay men. So it's really important for men to be cautious about not taking up too much space, or being cognizant of making sure that the most impacted, which are often women and marginalized genders, are leading the conversations, right? Are determining the solutions related to reproductive justice. But I also want men to understand that selfishly, like, you should care about these things too, because it impacts you. You too have bodily autonomy. You too have reproductive health needs. And because of that, you should be invested in this movement and working and following Black women and other people of color that have been leading the movement for hundreds of years.
Yeah, also to piggyback on that, men, I want y'all to tell your abortion stories, because it takes two people to get pregnant. And I know there are plenty of men that were saved by a woman or a partner going to have that abortion. And they were like, whoo, I didn't want to have that baby either. So I think way more men, if you're not going to tell your abortion story, shut up. But also talk to your boys, because clearly they're not listening to us. So I need men to talk to your boys and also tell your abortion stories too.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Someone put this in the chat, a question for me of what reproductive justice means to me. And I think all of that, right? I think I keep telling folks that if birth control was given to men instead of to women, it wouldn't be having the side effects that it does. It'd be a lot simpler. It'd be probably something, you know what I mean? And it's just something that's been so imbalanced because it is not directly impacting men as we like to think about it. But this is something that I have dealt with as a family. Like my mom has had an abortion, and it's something that we've just recently spoken about. And I was like, what do you mean? What? And like, it's just something that we didn't talk about, right? And she barely openly had this conversation with me when we started to talk about reproductive rights and abortion at the dinner table. And like my parents were so like pro, and I was like, this is really kind of weird, not something that I was expecting from older South Asian parents to talk about this. And my mom's like, yeah, like I've had an abortion. So many people in our family in India had an abortion. And I was like, how the hell have we never spoken about this before, right? And it was almost like this shame that they felt when they came here, more shameful about it in this like Christian secular, world that we're living in than they did about it there. And so it was really, really interesting to learn how much of an impact that it has directly on my family and my family at large, and how much it does impact, like you said, Joyelle, like there have been times where I've had close friends who are like, yo, we just got a test and it's positive, and this will literally ruin my life right now. This is not the time, And so I think it is such an important topic for all of us, not just because we have a mom or a sister or somebody who, we all know someone and we all love someone who's had an abortion, but you never know when it's going to be you, right? You never know when that time's going to come when you're going to say, I'm so glad that this access is available and it's safe that I can do it.
I think one thing, I mean, all that, yes. And I think like another thing is what frustrates me also is the conversation, like the fact that we also have this, I mean, so many people that are also neglecting in all the ways that an abortion, if not having an abortion, could lead to a child being born into a very neglectful environment, which only sets themselves up. I mean, the contributing factors to someone becoming a criminal later in life is what? Neglect, abuse, and I think poverty. And in all these situations, which white Republicans have actually done a very good job of stigmatizing or making Black people feel as though they cannot get abortions, and targeting specifically Black individuals. And I mean, it's the type of advertising that is done is actually, in my opinion, very, very problematic. And what was it? I think, Allison, I remember there was the statement going around like this, the least safe place for a Black child is in the womb.
Yeah.
It was disgusting.
We had protesters in Raleigh that would chant Black Lives Matter outside of clinics, I mean, just the perversion.
Gaslighting and perversion. It's just because these are the same people that are like, these are the same individuals that will say that they don't see color or promote racism in all sorts of ways, or claim, that the rage that I feel, because this is the same thing that leads to these children being born into neglectful environments because their parents are not ready to have a child. Because also, not only are we saying that abortion isn't illegal, we're going to take away your family education, we're going to take away your contraceptives, we're going to take away all of it, we're going to preach abstinence. And I have been in plenty of countries around the world, and all of us know that legalizing abortion does not stop abortion. It just stops safe abortion.
Yep.
And there are so many women around the world. You were talking about India. When I was working with an agency in Afghanistan, in Africa, and other areas. I remember there was a Doctors Without Borders that set up in Afghanistan to give women the opportunity to get their tubes tied. They only brought enough for, I want to say 2,000 procedures, and like 20,000 women, thousands of women showed up. I think it was like 200 procedures and thousands of women, and they rioted when they found out that they weren't going to be able to get that done. Or women in other parts of the world that don't understand that contraceptives exist, or that they can get an IUD. And yet we have that opportunity here, and we still have men that are telling us you can't have this right.
Mhm.
You need to be forced to have a child, even though you may not be in the best position to give that child the life that they deserve, which is only going to further lead down the line to that child suffering as an adult and then inflicting that trauma on other kids and so on and so forth. And that cycle of trauma is perpetuated and done specifically and predominantly in communities of color.
Yeah.
White people showing up or people showing up outside of and protesting saying Black Lives Matter because the most unsafe place for a Black child is in the womb is one of the most perverted, disgusting displays of racism that I've ever seen. And, and also I'm going to just end on this. If pregnancy is with the will of God, and so is erectile dysfunction, and men shouldn't have Viagra anymore.
There is a fun bill that I saw that said men need to get their wives' approval before being able to get that pill. And
Can
I was like, yes.
I want to push back against that though, because I don't think the response to taking away one group's bodily autonomy is to take away another's. I get that it's all fun and good, but I'm really tired of the snip snip boy sign or whatever at protests, because it's actually that isn't what we're asking for.
Right.
We're asking for everyone to be able to live with complete bodily autonomy. And
an eye for an eye is not.
yeah. And also just, what Liliana was talking about is just that beautiful world where every pregnancy, every child is wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Allison, next time you face those protesters though, hit up Joyelle, protest whisperer, here for this. I wanted to end with one final question to all of you. For those of us sitting at home right now or listening to this later, thinking that they aren't in politics, they're not as powerful as an organization, they don't have the following or the courage right now or this creative modality to talk about it on stage, what can we do? Because so often it feels just hopeless, right? What is one step that everybody can take today, a month from now, a year from now, to help in this fight for reproductive justice? Liliana, I'll toss it to you first.
I think one important thing is that has been, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people, because they're like, how did, I don't have the same ability that you do. I started off with nothing, grew up in a household with a lot of abuse, ended up living in and out of my car, experienced more accounts of sexual assault and rape than I can even count anymore. And so if I can come through all of that, get to where I am and be lucky enough to have this platform to help build a bench and tear down walls behind me, then anybody can do it. And so if you want to start easy and start simple, because from someone who was told that she was going to be nothing their entire lives, it starts with a single conversation with somebody in your own community. That's how I started building the confidence to get to where I am. Was I started building community. Other people that were like me, that felt like they didn't have any autonomy, that they felt like they didn't have any ability, that they didn't have a voice. And I started building a lot of that community in college for sure, but I've also built a lot of that community in this world. Allison is somebody I only got to meet this year, even though I've known who she was. And I consider Allison a member of my community, somebody that I can turn to for help when I feel tired and downtrodden and beat down in this line of work, when it feels like I'm the only one championing certain issues. But my community stands behind me and reminds me why I'm there and helps me do that. So for me, I've always said that talking to people and just getting those conversations, even if it starts with just writing it down, but talk to just one person and build from there. Because that ripple effect of you using your voice to speak your mind to one individual will end up having an impact like you could not imagine, because it grows. And just keep on talking to more and more people until you feel confident enough to talk to a group, and then a bigger group, posting on social media, drafting letters, reaching out to your elected officials to ask them to draft a resolution or another piece of legislation, and you build from there. Atlanta is one of the best places to do it because you can reach out and touch your elected officials. And I feel like we're one of the most community-driven cities in the country. So it's the best place to get your start.
Yeah. And I think it's so true what you're saying, Liliana, of just putting it out into the world. I mean, Joyelle and I met through another friend on a podcast, learned about her love, for abortion, right? And talking about it and fighting for it. Allison and I only recently met through a mutual friend who she's the neighbor of, on her way to a festival. She was wearing that shirt. And my friend was like, there's a lot more to that shirt and I was like, what do you mean? And so I looked it up and I was like, oh shit, she's ED of Amplify, Georgia, stored it away, had this opportunity, was like, hey, how about, and so just putting it out there in the world, so much just brings you into that space. So Allison, I'll toss it next to you.
I'd say find your organizing home. you are not alone, and there are incredible organizations across the US doing this work. You know, definitely in Atlanta and Georgia, very much the like home of the reproductive justice movement. So it's important to find that organization where you can grow in your activism and find different ways to get engaged and also plugged into the local strategy. Because it's so much more than you as an individual, and feeling isolated only serves like the antis and the opposition. And if you are in Georgia, I would say we would love if you'd sign on to a petition we're doing, which is for the Reproductive Freedom Act, which will be introduced at the upcoming legislative session in January, and it will repeal all existing abortion bans and affirm abortion as a right here in Georgia. It will not pass this year, but we're introducing it and building support across the state. So eventually, as power shifts and the legislature will be able to pass this bill. And that is at tinyurl.com/RFA. We'll put it in the chat so folks can sign it.
Yeah, and we'll share it on Be The One's website and social media as well. Joyelle, last but not least.
Why you save me for last? Okay, so I think if you have money, donate directly to abortion funds. Planned Parenthood is great and all, but directly to abortion funds, because those are the funds that are going straight to the people who need to have transportation, childcare, and getting an abortion out of a state, you know, that they are not able to access the service. If you don't have money, perhaps try escorting. Escorting people into clinics is a thing that I adore doing, especially because I get to talk to antis who are a fun group of people. And here's the thing, when you're talking to an anti, they love to engage because they didn't get hugs as children. So talk to them, have a calm conversation with an anti. And what happens is they're not yelling at the people going into the clinic, is what I've realized, because antis love to talk. And you just ask them a couple of questions, you know? First of all, where are your kids? Because that happened to me in Atlanta. I asked an anti, I was like, how many kids you got? He's like, I said 7. 7? And you here? If you don't go home and take care of your kids? So talking to the antis is a thing that I suggest people who do not necessarily have money to donate to the movement. Donate your time, and you too can be a protest whisperer.
I now understand why they call you the protest. That's such brilliant advice. I love that. That is such good advice. So talking about putting things out in the world, when I got the call to, you know, kind of help put this panel together, I happened to be in Chicago. I was literally walking into the Art Institute of Chicago. Hung up the call, went through the galleries, and I came upon this one gallery called an exhibition called All Directions at Once. And as it would so happen, it was about abortion. And there's a statement that I wanted to read because it's so often not talked about, and I thought it was important to kind of think about it from this perspective as well. And this is a quote that said, the benevolent colonizer wrote, "The Indians who are not treated well by their Dutch masters use the seeds of the peacock flower to abort their children so that their children would not become slaves like they are. The Black slaves have demanded to be well treated, threatening to refuse to have their children. In fact, they sometimes take their own lives because they are treated so badly, and because they believe that they will be born again, free and living in their own land. They told me this themselves." And Liliana, to your point about how so many of these children could end up in the system and could end up in jail, it seems like that's exactly what they want, right? Because they don't have this ability to do enslavement. Now we've got it through our jail system. And seeing this and reading this really put into perspective for me how deep safe abortion access goes and how it was used for so long, and it still is, to control people, especially Black people, and create a system of enslavement that they can work off of today. And how so often abortion was literally just that, because they didn't want these individuals, a specific group of people, to have it. And it goes to show you that so often there's so much deeper levels of everything to seemingly naive conversations or just superficial religious debates that we're having today. And continuously, for me, serves as a reminder to dig deeper into every conversation that you're having as well. So with that, I wanted to thank all of you, not only for your time and energy and effort today, but for everything that y'all are doing, for fighting the good fight. I know it can feel exhausting, but know that there are people here to support you and love on you. And I will hand it over back to Kate.
Thank you. I want to thank our amazing, I don't even want to call you panelists because you're so much more than that. This was an absolutely incredible conversation. And I thank you not only for your time today, because I know there's a million places you could be, but for the work that you are doing 24/7 in your communities and across this country, and the impact that it's having globally as well, as we talked a little bit earlier. I just want to leave on this note. We just talked a little bit about having conversations, right? And it all starts with one conversation. So everyone that is listening, I want to implore you, whether it's today or tomorrow, have a conversation with someone in the next 48 hours that you normally probably don't talk to, or you may not talk about abortion or local elections, or how we can be better white people, or what you can do in your own community. Have an uncomfortable conversation to the person that you at least expect you would talk to in the next 48 hours. That's my action for you. Munir and I worked together for 5 years, and we never had a personal conversation of anything outside of work. And that's what we talked about in his work, and my work is another podcast. But we had one conversation 2 years ago that changed everything in this work for us. And the reason that we are here today and having this platform is because of that conversation with Munir, who then reached out to you guys to be part of this. So thank you. Let's all have those uncomfortable conversations. Let's go vote in November and beyond, because elections happen all year, every year, especially local. And yes, Joyelle, I'm gonna let you have the last word here, because there's no way I'm closing this one out. Joyelle gets the last word before we close out here.
There's no reason that should be, but you two can have an abortion yacht club sweatshirt if you go to the abortion access front and go to their merchandise section, because this is the only yacht club I would want to be a part of.
And abortion access is going to be doing a training on reproductive justice at 4:30. So come back for that as well.
And just real quick, just real quick to remember, if people really wanted to see a downtick in abortions, they would really invest in family education planning and educating and making contraceptives and birth control more widely available. So just keep in mind that these individuals really have the people that are passing these laws really have no interest in stopping abortions. They just have every interest in oppressing people and further taking away their rights. It's not about stopping them. It's not about improving the lives of others or helping children out. This is pure selfish interests and about oppression, and that only. So if that doesn't fire you up, I don't know what will.
Absolutely. Thank you all
so much.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I, Joyelle, someone send me Joyelle's like email address or cell phone number.
Absolutely. I'm there. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Take care. Bye.